everybody, Death Stalker here. I'll tell you another little story about the offside world of racing. The vast majority of racers, when I was racing, used to camp at the racetrack. And, you know, there was people there with tents. You know, some people had trailers. Anybody we saw with a motorhome, we always accused them to be rich, whether or not it was theirs or they borrowed it or whatnot. But the one thing we all pretty much had in common was the fact that we all like to make campfires. And the nice thing about most racetracks, they actually would have a supply of free firewood or really cheap firewood around nearby the tracks. At Shannonville, they used to have a lumber mill that wasn't too far from the track, and they used to get the bark shavings. Like they're just basically slabs they cut off the trees that would end up being ground up for either mulch or whatnot, and they just got them and dropped them off the track. And you know, you'd pick them up, drag them back to your pits, and make your campfire with them. Now, most racers never had a saw. Generally what we did was we laid the firewood down in a big X. Now these slabs, just so you know, they're usually somewhere between 10 to 20 feet long. You know, an inch thick at the longest. You know, but most of the time they're probably cut thin, simply because that's the way lumber mills work. And you just lay that stuff in sort of like a big X, and you start the fire in the middle. And then what you do is, as the wood burned, you just kick the pieces into the center more and more to get it to consume it all. And you know, there was a lot of partying and drinking and whatnot around the campfire. I remember we had some Americans up, and the one guy had just gotten his bartending license, so he was trying to impress us with how good he was at making all these unusual drinks. And he'd ask him for something, and he had everything in his truck, and he'd make you a Cosmopolitan or a Harvey Wallbang or whatever. And his buddy who was with him had been drinking since around 6 o'clock at night, and by about 10 o'clock he was absolutely wasted. And he was sitting in a chair by the fire, and he kept sticking his foot out, and it would actually get pretty close to the fire, and we'd have to tell him to wake up and move your foot, and he would, and then a minute later he put it back in the fire again. Well, the funny thing was, he was wearing steel toe shoes, and anybody who's ever had like steel toe work boots, you know that if they get exposed to heat or cold, they tend to absorb that and contain it for a while. So you know, we were for about an hour trying to keep this guy from getting his foot in the fire. Then we weren't paying attention. Then all of a sudden he just woke up and proceeded to yell and scream and hopping up and down, and he ended up taking his foot and just jamming it into the cooler with all the cooler full of ice with all the beer and whatnot, trying to put the fire out. And once we realized what was going on, we were killing ourselves laughing. But it's just one of those silly things that sort of happen, or you know, when people aren't racing. The other time, it was a really crappy weekend in the fall, and it was raining and cold and damp and miserable, and everyone was trying to come up with a good excuse not to go out on the track on Sunday to race. And somehow the argument became over who was going to finish last, and everyone seemed to try to one-up themselves. Like the one guy said, "I'm just gonna, when the flag drops, I'm just gonna sit there with my bike and let you guys go by me." And the guy was like threatening to drive backwards on the track, and it just got pretty funny. And the end result was the guy who finished last was the guy who was too hungover to race the next day. The other thing too about these campfires is the wood that we got wasn't necessarily dried and ready for a fire. So you'd watch guys trying to ignite this stuff, and what would happen is you just couldn't start it. And you know, the one thing about racing is there tends to be a lot of gasoline around, and it's all that really good race gas, you know, 110, 116 octane. And what the guys would do is they'd pour a little bit of race gas on that wood, and then they ignite it. Well, what you get is a big whoosh and a giant flame, but necessarily the wood wasn't going to catch because the gasoline tended to burn so cleanly that it, the wood never have a chance to catch on fire. So I remember watching these guys from Quebec, and we're all sort of sitting there having our dinner and talking away, and we're watching these guys, and the guy took literally a 5-gallon container of gasoline and poured it on a giant pile of firewood. And it was, we were expecting there was going to be a big flame. What we didn't realize, because we were fairly far away, was he actually built the fire pretty darn close to his trailer. So, you know, he dropped the match on the thing, and, you know, the big whoosh in the flame, and without a word of a lie, the flames were 20 feet high. The canopy he had from his trailer literally melted in seconds. And then of course we got to watch the well, it was a very entertaining Chinese fire drill, as him and the other guys who were with him were running around. They were moving their bikes. Eventually someone got the truck and hooked up the trailer and pulled the trailer away. The trailer actually only got a little singed, much to our surprise. And the next day at the races meeting, we noticed that well, we knew who actually had lit the fire off, because the guy was there. He had literally no eyebrows, and he still smelled like burning hair. And that was, you know, 7-8 hours after the fact. And you know, and I know he had a bunch of showers trying to get rid of the smell. So it was it was one of those lighter sides of racing. So anyways, hope you enjoyed it. We sure did.